Mutual aid groups have been springing up across the nation and have been getting local and national attention. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly is mutual aid?
I think of mutual aid as the part of social movement work where we meet each other's direct survival needs based in a shared understanding that the systems have produced the crisis people are in and with an invitation to collective action.
So mutual aid is both a form of self-preservation and political action. It's not charity. Mutual aid projects are different from charity and simple generosity in four main ways: self-organization, egalitarianism, direct action, and the desire for social transformation. Mutual aid is inherently political because it brings marginalized peoples together to support one another and to ultimately demand their rights and move towards their vision of a better world.
I'm Tania Giordani. I am the founder and director of Narration NYC. I think for a lot of organizers, it's a lot of Black and brown people, a lot of indigenous people, right? Like, I don't think this is new. I think maybe the format is new. Response to poverty isn't new. Response to hunger isn't new. Or people have been doing that.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, mutual aid groups have come together in every city across the country, ranging from groups organized around neighborhoods to those that are specifically for economically disadvantaged minority or LGBTQIA+ groups. While many people have heard about mutual aid, there are still so many myths and misunderstandings surrounding it. Many people wrongly believe that the concept comes from the Russian scientist and anarchist Peter Kropotkin's 1902 book, Mutual Aid, A Factor in Evolution. Even though the book was important, particularly to anarchists, mutual assistance and self-help have been the cornerstone of minority and immigrant communities for centuries. Among the Black American community, the earliest mutual assistance societies were established in the late 18th century. The very first mutual assistance society was the Free African Society, founded in Philadelphia in 1787 by Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. The society undertook to build a fund for mutual aid, to help its members, and at the same time included many of the city's most important abolitionists and anti-slavery crusaders. Another early African-American mutual aid society is the New York African Society for Mutual Relief, founded in 1808, which was organized around the principles of mutual benefit, mutual relief, and abolition. After the Civil War, freed people organized Freedmen's Aid Associations, together with Northern Black Americans and white allies. These groups taught and built schools for newly emancipated peoples, gave them basic financial support, and advocated for their full emancipation on a national level. Immigrant groups also organized similar mutual aid groups, with almost every ethnic group arriving in the United States developing organizations for mutual support and political advocacy. Early Chinese immigrants who arrived in San Francisco were met at the pier by representatives of family associations, who provided them with housing and support services. These associations also arranged small loans for businesses, connected people with jobs, and provided protection and basic social insurance for their membership, such as medicine and money for travel back to China for the elderly. Asian American immigrants also established collective credit practices to help one another as they faced obstacles to participating in mainstream banking and financial institutions. Starting in the early 1900s, Sociedades Mutualistas sprang up in every major Spanish-speaking enclave in the country. In addition to offering shared insurance and supporting their members in all manner of ways, these societies took explicitly leftist political stances. From their founding, many societies worked together with labor unions and women's leaders across the country to build national campaigns against discrimination against women and Mexican American people as a group, and to demand an end to unjust working conditions for all peoples. At the turn of the 20th century, Unions and workers' mutual aid societies were central to the successes of the Socialist Party USA, helping them win congressional seats and mayorships across the country, and gain millions of votes in the 1908 and 1912 presidential elections. Though most of the labor movement was segregated in this era, such wildly influential unions as the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, led by the Black socialist A. Philip Randolph, brought together long Black American traditions of mutual aid and abolitionist protest with the anti-capitalist militancy of socialist labor unions.
The Great Depression stretched many mutual aid societies to their limits. FDR passed New Deal legislation that turned mutual aid societies from individual or personal groups into national programs. It was designed disproportionately to support white people who often had an easier time receiving benefits and support. Without the urgent need for health insurance or pensions, white mutual aid societies across the country slowly dissipated.
In the wake of the racist failures of the New Deal, mutual aid in the 20th century was as necessary as ever, as many Black and brown people still relied on labor unions and mutual aid societies for the support that the government was now giving their white counterparts. In California, for example, migrant workers, following the socialist labor leader Cesar Chavez, built on the tradition of Sociedades Mutualistas in building the United Farm Workers Union, one of the most successful unions in the country. At the same time, Black organizers built on church-based support systems and community support systems across the country. Black women organized the National Welfare Rights Association in 1966, pushing for the rights of women on welfare and its expansion, while supporting their over 25,000 memberships. Similarly, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, although not a mutual aid society in form, relied on many of the tenets of mutual aid and collective cooperation in their revolutionary socialist agitation.
In America, Black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people. And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize us and murder us because they have their orders to do so. The police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property because we own no property.
Following in the Black Panthers' footsteps, a number of similar organizations and groups emerged across the United States to support similarly marginalized groups, including the Young Lords Party, the Yellow Peril Movement, the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, made up of unionized and exploited, mostly Black workers in Detroit, and the Join Community Union, which brought together Southern migrants, student radicals, and welfare recipients in Chicago. However, the FBI and police across the country violently destroyed these groups, infiltrating their memberships, and had their leaders imprisoned, tortured, killed. While very few prominent organizations survived the U.S. government's war on these mutual aid groups, many new organizations sprang up in the 1980s. Groups like the Banana Kelly Community Improvement Association in the Bronx banded together to keep their neighborhoods alive, despite systematic and racist disinvestment, while teaching younger people a host of basic trades and advocating for cities to support poor and working-class communities of color.
The people who espouse and believe in sweat equity believe that a neighborhood is a building and a group of people who, working together, build out from within a building, a block, and create a neighborhood based upon knowing each other, based upon things that tie them together, based upon historic roots to that block. It's not how many units you can build, how quickly. Neighborhoods are people. It can be one building on Banana Kelly all by itself, which is where they started. And today that's a neighborhood. And no big planner would argue that it's anything but a neighborhood today.
At the same time, in response to the AIDS crisis, mutual aid groups started and led by AIDS patients who were disproportionately Black and brown and trans, supported one another spiritually and materially, and demanded a federal recognition of the epidemic.
People of color, women, IVDUs, children, Latinos, Latinas, Asians are all dying for AIDS treatment.
More recently, the largest mutual aid projects have emerged in response to the natural disasters made more common by global warming. In 2017, in the wake of Hurricane Maria, which killed 3,000 people and destroyed over $90 billion worth of property, people across Puerto Rico and the mainland diaspora organized a massive effort to provide food, shelter, and basic disaster relief, and demanded an end to the predatory loans the U.S. forced them into, and the liberation of their island. In the wake of COVID-19 and the failures of federal and state governments, thousands of new mutual aid groups have sprung up, while many older groups have seen explosions of new interest and energy. These groups have delivered tons of food, supported tens of thousands of people facing housing insecurity, mobilized hundreds of thousands in protest, redistributed millions of dollars to the less fortunate, and built historic coalitions for housing, food, and educational justice. However, these groups and this historic movement need your help. Wherever you are, there's likely some kind of mutual aid work going on all around you. From community fridges to tenant unions to support groups for incarcerated people and more. There are a million ways to get involved.
A really great thing to do for new people who want to join mutual aid work is to first to see what's going on where they live. Just, is there political work going on anything? Doesn't have to be perfect, but just like what's happening that involves the most vulnerable people in your community? Are people doing some kind of support to the tent city? Are people doing some kind of support for current drug users? Are people doing something around survivors of domestic violence? Like, where is something happening?
Figure out what vision your collective has for the future and what their politics are, and learn from them. Research groups that align with your goals and values. Listen to elders and do not impose yourself. Remember that while mutual aid organizing has recently become trendy, it has a long history among marginalized peoples. Seek to understand and root yourself in that history and tradition.